Jonathan Wexley had everything: a billion-dollar tech empire, a mansion in the hills, and the respect of the entire world. But all of it meant nothing the moment he heard his adopted daughter's scream echo through the phone. Amara wasn't just a child he rescued from the system. She was the only reason he believed he could be a father. But that one call changed everything. As he burst through his front door that day, what he saw inside his own home would leave even the most powerful man completely shattered, and what he uncovered would expose a dark truth no amount of money could silence. It was a typical Tuesday morning for Jonathan Wexley, venture capitalist, philanthropist, and one of the most talked about names on Wall Street. Known for turning obscure startups into billion-dollar companies, he lived in a high-security estate in the quiet outskirts of Connecticut, miles away from the chaos of New York. Jonathan was a man who thrived on control. Every hour of his day was calculated, structured, and purposeful. He knew how to read markets, how to predict trends, how to dominate a boardroom, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened that afternoon. It began with a call. No, just a voicemail. A breathless, trembling message from his longtime housekeeper, Marta, saying only 4 words that made Jonathan's entire world stop. "Amara is screaming. Help." That was all. The voicemail cut off there. No explanation. No details. Just raw panic. Jonathan didn't ask questions. He abandoned the conference table, ignored his team's startled expressions, and sprinted to his car. As he drove the 20 minutes home, each second feeling like a lifetime, his mind raced. Was it a break-in? An accident? Had someone hurt her? Amara wasn't a loud child. She was the kind of 10-year-old who spoke softly, thought deeply, and always carried a sketchpad wherever she went. Screaming didn't fit her nature, and that terrified him more than anything. He replayed the image of the first time he met her, a tiny girl sitting on a bench at the children's shelter, her hair in tight braids, her eyes filled with both curiosity and walls too high for her age. Jonathan had visited the shelter on a whim during one of his philanthropy sabbaticals. He never intended to adopt. But the moment she glanced up at him, as if scanning his soul in 2 seconds flat, something clicked. He couldn't explain. It wasn't pity. It wasn't guilt. It was connection. Now that same little girl was screaming inside his mansion, and he had no idea why. Jonathan slammed into the circular driveway and nearly tripped running up the steps. The front door was ajar. The security system hadn't been triggered. Odd. Alarming. He stepped inside, calling her name. Amara? Marta? But was met with a silence so heavy it pressed against his chest. He rushed through the marble foyer, past the grand staircase, and into the kitchen. Empty. No sign of struggle. The house, usually filled with light, felt suddenly darker, like the air itself was watching. He darted down the hall to Amara's room and pushed the door open. She wasn't there. Her sketchbook was. It lay on the floor, its pages torn and scattered. One drawing caught his eye, a tall, shadowy figure standing at her window. No face, just a looming shape. Jonathan's heart pounded harder. Was this just her imagination or a warning? Suddenly he heard it, a sob muffled from upstairs. He sprinted to the guest hallway and followed the sound to the linen closet. It was locked from the outside. His fingers fumbled with the latch, and when the door swung open, his heart stopped. There, huddled in the corner, was Amara. Her small body was trembling, eyes wide with terror, hands clutching her knees. Marta was beside her, holding her protectively. Tears in her eyes. Jonathan dropped to his knees. What happened? He whispered, voice cracking. Amara didn't answer. She just pointed behind him, toward the hallway. He was here, she whispered. In the room. Jonathan turned, but no one was there. Just an empty corridor with expensive wallpaper and polished wood. But something felt wrong, off, and then he noticed the painting at the end of the hallway slightly crooked. That painting hadn't moved in years. Jonathan sent Marta and Amara to the nearby guest house and called the police. Within 20 minutes, officers were sweeping the entire estate. No forced entry, no broken windows, no strange footprints, no fingerprints, nothing out of place. They chalked it up to a bad dream or a child's imagination, but Amara remained visibly shaken. She refused to go back to her room, wouldn't speak unless it was to Marta, wouldn't touch her dinner, wouldn't even glance at the house from the guest house window. Jonathan had never seen her like this. His brilliant, quiet, observant daughter was now locked in a shell of fear. Later that night, Jonathan sat alone in his study. The fireplace was lit, but the warmth didn't reach him. He was staring at the security system's hard drive, nervously, cueing footage from each camera around the house. He knew what to look for. He'd reviewed security videos for years on behalf of business holdings, insider theft, even protest threats at events. But this was different. This was his home. This was his daughter. Most of the footage was normal, static, uneventful, until he reached the backyard camera. At exactly 1:43 p.m., the time Marta said she heard the scream, there was something. The camera view, which pointed at the koi pond just below Amara's window, trembled slightly as if disturbed. Then for 3 long seconds, in the far left edge of the screen, a shape appeared. Tall, unmoving, vaguely human, vaguely wrong. Its outline flickered slightly in the sunlight, too sharp for a shadow, too slow for a person. No face, just blackness. Jonathan's breath caught. He rewound. Played again, froze the frame, zoomed in. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a camera smear. And it definitely wasn't anyone on his staff. He had vetted them all personally, and their uniforms were distinct. This silhouette stood with unnatural stillness, almost as if it had been waiting, watching. He forwarded the clip to the police, but their response was dismissive. Camera artifacts happen, the officer said with a shrug. Could be an insect close to the lens, a tree, or lighting distortion. Nothing actionable here. The official report was closed before dinner. But Jonathan's instincts sharpened. By years of business acumen and gut decisions screamed otherwise. Something was off, deeply off. And Amara had seen it too. He went back to her sketchbook, which still lay scattered on the floor of her bedroom. Drawing after drawing showed the same dark figure, first outside her window, then inside her room, then behind her door. And in one image, it was standing in the kitchen next to Marta while Marta chopped vegetables, unaware. Each sketch was clearer, more urgent, more detailed. The last one chilled him the most. The figure was holding a small object in its long, black fingers, a heart-shaped locket. Jonathan's heart dropped. The locket, Amara's locket, was missing. It had been a gift from her birth mother, the only possession she brought with her when she was adopted. She kept it under her pillow. She never took it off. He raced to her nightstand drawer and, as he feared, the locket was gone. How? No one had entered. No alarm had gone off, no locks broken. And yet, it was gone. Jonathan collapsed into his armchair, mind spinning. What if this wasn't just a hallucination? What if this figure, whoever or whatever it was, had been coming for days, even weeks? What if Amara had been trying to tell him all along? He remembered something she had whispered to Marta once, something he overheard through the kitchen doorway. The shadow talks to me when you're asleep. At the time, he thought it was part of a dream. Now he wasn't so sure. That night he made 2 calls. First, to his private security director, demanding a total sweep of every square foot of the estate with dogs, heat sensors, and infrared drones. Then he made a second call to someone he hadn't spoken to in years. An ex-CIA investigator turned private consultant named Samara Price. She had handled cases that law enforcement called unexplainable. Paranormal, psychological, even spiritual. He didn't know what this was, but he knew it wasn't normal. And Samara didn't ask questions. She only said, "I'm on my way." As he ended the call, Jonathan walked out to the guest house to check on Amara. She was asleep beside Marta, her small hand wrapped tightly around the woman's arm, her eyebrows furrowed even in sleep. He knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I'll protect you," he whispered, "no matter what it takes." But deep in his gut, he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had found its way into their lives, into their home, wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Samara Price arrived the next morning just after sunrise. She stepped out of a matte black SUV wearing a long gray coat and dark aviators, her presence commanding but calm, like someone who'd stared into madness more than once and come out the other side wiser, but less trusting. Jonathan hadn't seen her in nearly 5 years. The last time had been after a data breach at one of his subsidiaries that nearly cost him his reputation. Samara had solved it in 48 hours. Now she was back for something much more personal. "Tell me everything," she said, bypassing coffee, small talk, and formalities. They sat in the surveillance room as Jonathan replayed the footage for her, pausing on the tall, faceless silhouette that had haunted him all night. Samara leaned forward. "This is not a camera glitch," she said quietly. "And that thing, it's not random, it's posing." Almost like it knew exactly where the camera was. Jonathan's breath caught. "So, it's human?" Samara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled a tablet from her bag and began typing. "I've seen figures like this before. Not identical, but similar. They show up in drawings. From children who've been through trauma. Sometimes it's symbolic, a way of showing fear. But when you pair that with a missing object, a child's scream, and physical evidence, this isn't symbolic. It's targeted." She walked him to Amara's room, examining the torn sketchbook pages, the windows, the locks, the vent covers. "Any signs of past break-ins? Maintenance workers recently?" "No," Jonathan said. "We've had the same staff for years. Background checks, loyalty bonuses, 24/7 surveillance. This place is a fortress." Samara knelt and inspected the window frame. Her gloved fingers traced a thin, nearly invisible gouge in the wood. Someone opened this from the outside. And they knew how to do it quietly. She stood. "I want to speak to Amara." Amara sat cross-legged on the couch in the guest house, wrapped in a thick hoodie that dwarfed her frame. She hadn't spoken much since the incident. Marta hovered nearby protectively. Samara knelt gently in front of her, eye level. "Hi, Amara. My name is Samara. I'm here to help keep you safe. Would it be okay if I asked you some questions?" Amara didn't nod, didn't speak. But she didn't say no either. Samara continued, her voice calm, warm, almost hypnotic. "Can you tell me about the shadow?" The girl's lips trembled. Her eyes flicked toward the window. Then finally she whispered, "It doesn't like the light." Samara stayed still. "Have you seen it before?" Amara nodded. "How many times?" "Every night for 3 weeks." Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. "Did it ever come close to you?" Amara nodded again. "It stood next to my bed. But it didn't touch me. It just watched." Samara gently asked, "Did it ever say anything?" Amara hesitated, then whispered, "It said ... Give it back." "Give what back?" "I don't know," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't take anything, but it kept saying it, again and again." Jonathan's heart sank. He didn't know what it meant, but it was clear now. This wasn't a figment of her imagination. This was something real, something malicious. Samara turned to him. "We're not dealing with a burglar or a stalker. We're dealing with something that believes this child has something it wants." That night, Samara stayed up reviewing blueprints of the house. She'd asked Jonathan for any history on the estate, previous owners, remodels, land history. At 3:17 a.m., something in the architectural archive caught her eye. In 1978, The estate had belonged to a man named Dr. Walter Eames, a disgraced physician rumored to have run illegal experiments on trauma patients. The house had a sealed basement, one that hadn't been opened since the property changed hands after his death. The blueprints showed a narrow stairwell hidden behind the library bookcase, long since covered up by drywall. By dawn, Samra had ripped through the paneling and exposed the staircase. A pungent scent of mold and age leaked into the hall. Jonathan followed her down, flashlight in hand. The steps groaned beneath their weight. The basement was small, windowless, lined with filing cabinets and rusted medical trays. But in the corner sat a wooden crate. Inside it was a child's bracelet, old, tarnished, the name AR etched on a dot. Samra froze. "I've seen this name before," she said. "This belonged to a girl who went missing in 1979, Alicia Reeds. She was never found. Her family swore she disappeared from this property." Jonathan's voice was hoarse. "You're telling me the thing that's after my daughter is looking for Alicia Reed's bracelet?" Samra closed the crate. "Not just that. It thinks Amara has taken its memory, its story, its right to be remembered, and it wants it back." Jonathan suddenly remembered the sketchbook again. One of the drawings had a name scribbled faintly beneath the shadowy figure, Alicia. Jonathan stood still, barely breathing as Amara's sobs echoed through the high-ceilinged hall. Her voice, fragile and broken, carried a weight no child should ever bear. He watched her curl into herself in the corner of the room, her small hands gripping the hem of her dress, her eyes swollen, haunted. The therapist tried to coax her gently, but Amara had built walls now, tall and trembling. She was somewhere far away, tucked deep in her trauma, and Jonathan, for all his wealth and power, had no key to reach her. After the confrontation in the basement, the full truth had come out like a cracked dam, unfiltered, brutal. The man responsible for Amara's pain, Michael, Jonathan's trusted childhood friend, had not only betrayed his hospitality, but also violated something sacred. The investigation revealed that Michael had a long-standing record of suppressed misconduct allegations. In other cities, none had ever stuck until now. With Jonathan's high-profile cooperation, the police were finally able to make the charges stick. Michael was denied bail. But even justice didn't bring peace. The media storm that followed nearly destroyed Jonathan's public image. Headlines screamed, "Millionaire's mansion," hidden horrors revealed. Social media was relentless. Overnight, the name Jonathan Wexley became synonymous with privilege-blind negligence, even though he had done everything to protect Amara. Once he knew the truth, people questioned how he hadn't seen the signs sooner. Shareholders began to pull away. His company's board called an emergency meeting. In a week, Jonathan's world shifted from soaring towers to collapsing pillars. He didn't care. Not anymore. The only thing that mattered now sat in that therapy room, shaking with fear. Every day, Jonathan sat outside the office during her sessions. He canceled everything, resigned from the board, handed off his CEO responsibilities, and turned down every press appearance. His mansion, once buzzing with assistants and chefs, now stood silent. He dismissed the staff temporarily and transformed the house into a healing space for Amara. He painted the walls soft pastels, let her choose stuffed animals and blankets, even rebuilt the old greenhouse into a fairy garden with twinkle lights that lit up every night. It didn't fix her, but it was something. Still, the question that tormented him was this: could she ever trust again? Could she ever trust him? Because that was what truly shattered Jonathan, the way Amara looked at him now. Not with fear, but with uncertainty. She had once run into his arms, called him daddy with joy. Now she flinched when his shadow crossed the hallway. It wasn't rejection. It was survival. One rainy night, Jonathan sat by the window while Amara lay asleep on the couch nearby. The storm outside echoed the storm inside him. He whispered aloud, "What kind of father am I?" He didn't expect an answer. But Ben, came a small voice from the couch, the kind that stays. Jonathan turned slowly. Amara was awake, her eyes still puffy, but clearer than before. "You stayed, didn't you?" she said again, hugging her knees. "Michael was mean. But you didn't leave. You believed me." Jonathan felt tears sting his eyes. He walked over cautiously and knelt beside her. "I'll always believe you, baby. And I'll always stay. Even when it's hard. Even when you're scared." She nodded, still uncertain, but no longer closed off. She let him sit beside her, let her shoulder touch his for a moment before leaning against him. It was small, but it was enough to melt something frozen. That night, Jonathan made a promise to himself and to her. No more running from pain. More pretending everything was okay. Healing wouldn't come from silence or time. It would come from love, from being present, from creating a world where Amara could choose her own story. So he started a new foundation in her name, the Amara Project, a center dedicated to helping children of color in foster care receive trauma-informed support and safe placements. He poured millions into it, not for redemption, but because she mattered more than the headlines ever would. Every decision moving forward would honor her truth. Still, the road wasn't easy. There were setbacks. Amara had nightmares, panic attacks, days where she wouldn't speak. But she was resilient. She began drawing again, soft shapes, colorful birds, little girls with glowing crowns. She even asked Jonathan to read to her one night, the first time since the incident. As the months passed, they rebuilt, slowly, gently, together. And one quiet morning, as they watered the flowers in the greenhouse, Amara looked up at him and asked, "Can I call you Dad again?" Jonathan knelt beside her, barely able to answer. He nodded, eyes full, and she hugged him tight, certain, healing. He had once believed money could solve anything, but it was love, patient and raw, that saved them both. Not a billion-dollar contract, not a company empire, just a man who refused to walk away, and a little girl who dared to trust again. Jonathan stood motionless in the courtroom hallway, staring through the glass at his daughter. Amara sat beside Detective Sloan, her small hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes shifting between the floor and the lawyer who had just entered the room. For a year he had believed himself to be her protector, but now he realized she had protected him too. Protected him from a truth so dark, it nearly swallowed them both. The trial had concluded just moments ago. The man responsible, Nathan Kellerman, the estate's former head of maintenance, had been found guilty of child endangerment, abuse, and multiple counts of obstruction of justice. The testimonies from Amara, the recordings, and the sealed letters had built a case that not even the most expensive defense could deflect. But this moment wasn't about justice served. It was about a father finally understanding what it meant to truly show up. Amara hadn't spoken to Jonathan since the first week of the trial. Not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. Therapy sessions were daily now. She slept more. She drew less. She had stopped wearing the yellow scarf that used to be her comfort blanket. But on this day, something shifted. Jonathan stepped into the room slowly. He didn't say a word. He sat beside her, the same way she used to sit beside him in the garden when she first moved in. Just breathing, waiting, offering space. She didn't look at him at first, but when she did, her eyes welled with tears. Not fear, not confusion. Just release. "Can we go home now?" she whispered. He nodded. "We'll go wherever you want." She took his hand. The mansion no longer looked the same. The long, cold hallways had been repainted with warmth. The sterile decor of high society had been replaced with vibrant artwork, most of it Amara's. The piano room had been turned into an art studio. The basement had been demolished and rebuilt into a community healing center for foster children in transition. Jonathan had sold the tech company. He now ran the center full-time with Amara as his daily companion and advisor. She was thriving. She spoke again with power in her voice. She laughed. She asked questions that made everyone pause and reflect. She wrote letters to other girls still stuck in broken systems. And in those letters, she never mentioned the abuse directly, but she always closed with the same line. Your voice is a storm, never be ashamed of how loud it gets. Jonathan, meanwhile, had grown into a new version of himself. Not the stoic CEO who measured value by numbers, but a father who measured time by giggles and watercolor stains. Every night, he still replayed that first voicemail in his head, not as a trauma, but as a call to purpose. Because in that scream, he had finally heard her. And in hearing her, he had found a version of himself that money could never buy. The community hall was full former foster children, social workers, activists, and families who had found one another through resilience. Amara stood on stage, now 12, holding a small gold plaque. Her voice didn't tremble as she read her speech. To the people who listened, thank you. To those still afraid to speak, we are listening now. And to the man who heard me when no one else did, my dad, thank you for not giving up, even when I pushed you away. Jonathan wiped away a tear as the crowd rose to its feet. The applause didn't echo as loud as that scream from the mansion once did, but it healed just the same.